Hello, and welcome back to the Symone podcast. I am your host, Symone, and today's episode is going to be a good one. I want you to lean in, grab your notebook, because today we're talking about the top 2 traits of high-performing leaders. This is what everybody wants to know. This is where the magic happens, and I'm going to break it down for you today. So let's get started. So it wouldn't be fun if I told you the number 1 trait, right? So let's start from the bottom and work our way up, okay? So the number 2 top trait of all great high-performing leaders is great leaders make the right kills. Now, several episodes ago, if you've been rocking with me for a little while now, you know that I talked about on a previous podcast what it means when a leader makes a kill. And I think I talked about it when I was discussing how you get promoted. Well, I mentioned in that podcast, which I'm going to link in the show notes, I mentioned in that podcast that in order for leaders to get promoted, or for you to get promoted into your first leadership role, you do need to make a kill. Nobody's just going to hand you something for being, just for showing up to work on time. You know, great, we appreciate you, but I'm going to need you to do something that's worthy of this extra bonus, or worthy of this extra assignment, or worthy of the authority that you're going to have to carry in this new leadership role. So when I say today that the top 2 traits, the second of the top 2 traits, is that great leaders make the right kills, it's important that you know what I'm speaking of. The right kill, first and foremost, is always going to be leaders do their jobs. I've said it before, I'll say it again. You have to do the work that people actually expect you to do. You cannot exceed expectations if you haven't met them yet. Sounds really simple, sounds really common sense, but you and I know that common sense is not always that common, right? And we all need a reminder here and there. Okay, I know there's a lot going on. I know we're in the midst of a lot of change. I know we're in the midst of transition. I know people are talking about innovate, and everybody wants to come up with the next best thing. But what's the right now thing that you're accountable for? When you apply for this position, what were those bullet points in the job description? Hopefully you had a job description when you applied. If not, hopefully you created one after you got the position, because that is going to be your framework for success. I read an article that I shared to my Instagram story sometime last week. It was out of Inc. magazine, and it was a recent study. I think it was 2019, so it was very recent. A recent study that surveyed people who had bad bosses, or what were the qualities that made bad bosses or bad leaders. And the people that had bad bosses, or the quality that was rated as at the top of the list for a bad boss, is a boss that doesn't get the job done. It wasn't this, my boss is disrespectful. It wasn't that my boss doesn't like me, my boss shows favoritism. It wasn't my boss has absolutely no interpersonal skills, which is important. Let's be clear. Interpersonal skills are important. It was they don't do their work. They don't do their work. They don't do their job. I can't depend on this person to be competent in the position that they are in. I think competence is highly underrated for leaders. Highly underrated. I think there are a million books about communication, and there are 1,000 books about strategy and innovation, and then there are at least a few hundred books about emotional intelligence and about supply chain management, or all these different topics. I mean, leadership is a huge topic, but boy, oh boy, there are not so many books out there that just talk about being effective. Just being effective. And by effective, we mean having the right effect, the effect that you were hired for. It's extremely important that you make the right kill. Now, there was another rating that people have for bad bosses. There was another area of very, very low performance for bad bosses, and that's actually going to tie into our number one trait. So we'll skip that one for now. But for right now, let's talk about what I mean by the right kill. It's important that you're not just doing things because you can do them. And I want to speak to all my multi-passionate, multi-talented, multi-competent leaders out here, or aspiring leaders who can do a lot of things. Raise your hand if you have shiny object syndrome and you have the ability to pull off a lot of different kinds of things. Maybe you're great at projects. Maybe you're great at getting people to move the needle on their performance. Maybe you're awesome in decision strength or something like that. I am one of those people who is multi-passionate and multi-competent. However, when you are multi-passionate and you have a lot of different directions that you can go in, it's really important that you focus on what makes sense. And I'm going to give you 3 P's, the 3 profit P's that are going to help you make the right kill. Not just any kill, the right kill. So the first P is that your kill is profitable for the organization. What do I mean? What are the strategic targets that your organization is aiming at? What are the metrics that your customers and your industry measures you on? What is for your executives, what have they been talking about all year? What's the thing that keeps them up at night? These are the things that are profitable for the organization, meaning they are going to leave the organization in a better place after you make this kill. The second P is it's profitable for your people. Keyword is your people. Now, who are your people? Your people include your peers, your direct reports, and your leader. No matter what position you're in, no matter if you're entry level or if you're a C-suite executive, everyone has direct reports or someone that depends on them to do their work. Let's put it like that. Because sometimes people don't have people that they can hire and fire, but there are people who, if you don't do your work, they can't do their job. So we're going to pull them into that direct report category, even though they don't report to you. No matter where you stand in the position, where you stand in the company or in your ministry, you're going to have your direct reports. So if you're a ministry professional, your direct reports could be the congregation. Or if you are head of a volunteer team, it could be the volunteers that are looking to you for guidance. Those would be in that category. Those people would be in that category. The next part of your people is going to be your peers. So who are the people that work alongside you to accomplish similar or the exact same task? So very simple. Anybody that's a peer is anybody that doesn't report to you, but you also don't report to. Right? So your immediate peers, think about the 5 people that you work with most often. Think about the 5 people that show up on most of your conference calls. Those are going to be your peers. Peers have similar authority in the organization as you as well. So that's something to keep in consideration. And then you have a leader. I'm going to tell you a secret. It'll never show up on any job interview or a job application. But it is your job to make your leader look good. And I know some of the new school career folks don't necessarily like to hear stuff like that because that sounds really old school. And for the record, I'm not old school age-wise, but I am old school when it counts, when it matters. When I am old school when it comes to wisdom, right? I do what's wise. I do what works, right? And so one thing that previous generations seem to have a better handle on is, it is part of your responsibility to make your leader look good. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be a brown noser, and that doesn't mean that you have to be fake and phony. It just means that you need to always keep in mind what's most important to your leader and figure out how you can deliver for them. That's it. That's all. Don't be a problem child. Don't be a problem leader. Don't be the problem that they always have to solve and they always have to account for. That's a big part of making your leader look good. Don't be your leader's headache, right? So those are the 3 P's of profit, so that you know exactly what is the right kill. It's going to be profitable for your organization, profitable for your people, and profitable for you. Great example of that is the story of David and Goliath, right? So when David decided that he was going to kill Goliath, he actually that decision satisfied all 3 of those P's. Now I'm going to go down the list for you. It was profitable for his organization. So in this case, his organization was the nation of Israel, right? Because Goliath was a big bully and everybody was scared of him. And until he defeated him, they were intimidated, they were in fear, and there were some things that they just couldn't do as a nation group and as a people group until they had overcome this hurdle, this barrier to their national security, right? So it was profitable for the organization for David to kill Goliath. It was profitable for his people, meaning it was profitable for his immediate leader, who would have been King Saul in that example. It was also profitable for the army that he wasn't even a part of, which I guess technically you could consider his peers in this situation, because they did try to give him some armor, even though he ended up not wearing it. And it was profitable for anybody that was looking up to him, anybody that was going to have to answer to any of those people. Why? Because they couldn't figure out how to get it done. And so he solved an unsolvable problem for them, right? And then, of course, it was profitable for him. You know, David understood the reward that was in play by him going up to the battlefield. You know, in that situation, I believe the reward was that he could marry the princess. His family wouldn't have to pay taxes, and there might have been one other thing, but there was something in it for him. You know, it's okay for you to do things that are in it for you, but when we overemphasize our personal reward at the expense of rewarding for the organization or what's rewarding for the people, we miss those other P's in the right kill strategy. Like, this is about making the right kill. It's not just making yourself look good. Great leaders do what's in the best interest of the organization and in the best interest of the people around them, not just in the best interest of themselves, right? Which leads me to the number 1 trait of a high-performing leader, of a great leader. The number 1 trait is that great leaders make other people great. That's right. Great leaders don't just focus on their own performance. That is a luxury that only individual contributors have. Once you step into the terrain of leadership, you no longer are only responsible for your own results. You are responsible for the outcome, not necessarily the work, but the outcome of other people's activities, of other people's, hopefully they are focused on the right activities. And if not, then it's your job to make sure that they get focused on what matters, right? So let's go back to that study. Remember how I said that study had 2 things that they ranked as most common in bad bosses. One was they don't get the job done, and the other one was they don't develop their employees. So, what does that tell us? Great leaders make sure that their employees, their staff, or their volunteers have what they need to succeed. They do the teaching, they do the coaching, they create the environment for success for others. That's really important, because leaders are not leaders just because they have a rank or because they have a title. Leaders are leaders because they're taking somebody somewhere. Where are you taking your people? And are you there yet? Don't you remember being on road trips and asking whoever was driving in the car, are we there yet? Are we there yet? You know, sometimes people do that in their careers too. Like, hey, I've been under this person's leadership for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 2 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What do I have to show for it? You always want to make sure that the people that you are leading have something to show for being led by you. You also want to make sure that your people are shining, that you are not shining by yourself. Once again, leadership is not about being the star player. Leadership is about creating other stars. Think about the coach, the NBA coach Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson was someone who had a pretty successful career as a professional basketball player. I think he played for about 12 years for the New York Knicks. He won 2 championship rings. So if he had retired from being a player and said, hey, I'm done with basketball, I'm going to move on and do something else, great. He would have been a great player. He would have been a high performing player. He would have been a champion. And no one could take that away from him, right? But when he decided to stay in the arena of professional basketball, but to transition to a coach, he had to learn how to be a star coach, not a star player. And there is a difference. That's a different skill set than getting out there and dribbling and setting up the shots and shooting and making sure that your team trusts you and all those kind of things. It's a little bit different being a star player than it is being a star leader. And what he had to do is figure out, how can I make my team shine? How can I create an environment where the players that I have can play at their highest and best potential? And then we go into, him creating the triangle offense, and MJ decided he was going to start, lifting weights, and, because they couldn't make it before Phil Jackson showed up to the Chicago Bulls. They couldn't make it past the Detroit Pistons. They couldn't make it. They had the best player in the world on their team, but they couldn't make it to the NBA Finals, and they couldn't get a ring until they got a coach who knew how to get the best performance out of their team. He turned the team into superstars. And we all know their names today, yes, because of their contribution and their decision to play, and also because of the coaching greatness of Phil Jackson. You could say the same thing about Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr is someone who had championship rings as a player, and he has them as a coach. And it's a different skill set that you got to exercise. Those are different muscles. So I want to share with you a test that I have used to make sure that I'm on track with making sure that my people are being led well by me, and that they have something good, positive to show for it, either personally or professionally. And in my case, I prefer both. I prefer for you to have a personal and a professional blessing from being led by me. And I'm going to tell you, I came up with this years and years and years ago when I took over my first team. I said to myself, in 6 months from now, everybody on my team should be in a different place. They should be in a different place professionally. They should be in a different place personally. If I get 6 months from now, so it's you'll be listening to this in April. So 6 months from April is October. If I get to October 1st and nothing has changed and nothing has improved for my people, not for me, for my people, then I got to go back to the drawing board, and I got to figure out how to get them where they need to be, because I've fallen down on the job. I call that the 6-month test. And I encourage you to use it. Maybe 6 months is not enough time for you. Maybe 6 months is too much time. Maybe you don't have enough time. You don't have time to wait for 6 months. Maybe you need 90 days. I think that's great. I tend to look at 90 days as learning new skills, and 6 months is when you can get to probably the earliest time that you can get to really mastery and a sense of excellence in all of the different competencies that go into whatever you do professionally, right? So that's why I set the target at 6 months. So let's recap the top 2 traits of high-performing leaders. Number 2, great leaders make the right kills, and they follow the 3P strategy for determining what the right kill is. That's profitable for the organization, profitable for your people, and profitable for you. And then the number one trait of high performing leaders is that they make other people great. And a great little test for that is that 6-month test that we talked about. Set a target, set a goal for your people, not just for you, but for your people. Look at their performance, look at what they're measured on, look at what they've shared with you about their personal lives. Because Lord knows, in order to be a performance coach, you got to kind of be a little bit of a life coach. That was a lesson I learned early on in my career. Look at those goals and measure 6 months from now and make sure that you're holding yourself accountable to being the best leader, the best star maker that you can be. Well, that's it for today's episode. As usual, I'm always happy to hear from you guys via Instagram. DM me at the Kelly Symone. Make sure that you are subscribed at kellysymone.com/podcast so that you can get the training guide that I'm actually coming out with probably within a week or so. So get that leadership training guide. It's going to have some good information, good material for you if you're starting out on your leadership journey or if you're restarting. Some of us are second chance leaders. We're like, oh, I need to reboot. I've gone astray. So thanks for listening and take care.